On this example, we're given two functions. F of x is 7x plus 1 and g of x is the square root of x. We're asked to find Fogg and Goff function composition, f of g of x and g of f of x in the domain of each. So start the Fogg of x. I'm going to do this the way I prefer to do this. That's the same as f of g of x. That means you're going to take the g of x and you're going to substitute it into the f function. So we're taking this g of x function and we're going to replace it for the x in the f of x function, which means instead of writing down 7x plus 1, instead of the x, we're going to write what the function g of x is, which is the square root of x. And you're pretty much done. I can't simplify that any. And so that's what goes here. Now, when we do the domain, you have to look at the inside function first. So the domain of the inside function, which is the square root of x, let me erase these lines out. The square root of x, I recommend going to your calculator and typing in second square root of x and graphing it. Now what's going on, it looks like it's going from to left from 0 all the way to infinity. The only question is the 0 included or not? So one quick way to find out is hit trace 0, enter, and if you get an answer, 0 is an answer, that means it is included, so use a bracket. If you got nothing like this, like -1, enter, you don't see anything. That means -1 is not included, but 0, we saw an answer. But we also have to check this function, the one we found for f of g. So let's do 7 second square root x, make sure you get out of there, plus 1, and 1 plus 1 is on the outside of the square root. And it looks very similar. Let's just check to make sure. Well, the only thing we have to look at really is the fact that the x is underneath the square root. And another thing you can do, you have to realize that you can take the square root of any positive number and 0. So x must be greater than or equal to 0. And it's verified once again. If you hit trace 0, enter, we get an answer. And if you do like -0.0001, we don't get an answer. It's kind of a quick way to check it. So what that means is the domain of this function is also 0 to infinity. So the domain of Fogg is what these two functions have in common. Since they're the exact same thing, it's pretty obvious that they have each other in common, 0 to infinity. Now we're going to go the other direction. We're going to do g of f of x. Using the same reasoning, I'm going to write down my two functions again. F of x is 7x plus 1 and g of x is the square root of x. Let's just make sure. So this time we're going to take the f function and substitute it into the g. So g is the square root of x, but I'm not going to write down the x because I'm taking this whole function and I'm putting it in place of the x into the g function. So it's the square root of 7x plus 1. So that's what we have here for now. Well, for always. Now you have to find the domain. Now, on the domain of Goff, we got to do the inside function first. Now the inside function is 7x plus 1. So the domain of 7x plus 1 is a line. Its graph is a line that goes from negative infinity to positive infinity, left to right. That's what we're looking at. But we also have to look at the domain of this function. Now this one's going to be a little bit more complicated to do in the calculator. I'm just going to erase this out a little bit. And we're looking at the domain of the square root of 7x plus 1. So second square root 7x plus 1. Now all that's under the square root graph. Now, it looks like that it may be getting to 0. Let's find out. If you hit trace 0, enter, we do get an answer. Let's just do like -0.0001. We get an answer also. So 0 isn't the only place where it stops or begins from the left. That means we gotta look at something else. We have to look at the domain of square root of 7x plus 1, which is what we're trying to find. We already know that you can only take the square roots of numbers that are greater than 0 or equal to 0, which means that 7x plus 1 must be greater than or equal to 0. So we're going to solve this equation. Subtract 1 from both sides and divide by 7. So what that's telling us is, if we go back to our calculator, if we type in trace negative 1 divided by 7, enter, we get an answer. But if you do anything less than that, we won't. Let's just do like negative 1. We won't get an answer. So that's telling me is that the domain of this function, it goes from negative 1/7 to infinity. Now, the true domain of Goff is what this and this have in common. Well, this has everything, and this only goes from negative 1/7 to infinity, so what they have in common is this interval. Because that's definitely inside of that one. And that's it.